And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple, creator of the Roguelike TTRPG, which we will be getting into tonight, and is doing very, very well on its crowdfund. The one and only Ares Marks. Save your God of War jokes, folks. He's heard them all. How you doing today, man?
I am so well. I'm happy to be here. I just got done with a semester of school, so a lot of weight was taken off me, and then jumping right into the Kickstarter. Now that we've funded, there's some weight that's been taken off of me from there too.
Yeah, I can get that, and I would revisit my old school, but I'm pretty sure my English professor is still mad at me for the April Fool's incident.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
It wasn't anything too egregious. He foolishly set a assignment with a due date of April 1st, so I decided to have some fun. I submitted the assignment, but it was mirror written.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a lot of dedication. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, the Roguelike TTRPG, we're actually 300% funded now, so that's super exciting, and we're about halfway through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the time of this recording, it's at 15.3 thousand. You're asking for 4.9 thousand. Interesting move to go with 4,999. With 16
could have
days
easily
to go.
just been. Yeah, it could have been 5, of course, right? But
I wonder if that was supposed to be a nod to those MSRPs where it's like X99 or something like that.
yeah, to a certain extent, right? Like, could it have been a nice even 5,000? Of course, right? But we could always just, have it $1 less, and we could spot the dollar for sure.
Oh yeah. So, a bit of a tradition around here is opening with the humble beginnings of a sort. So, I'd like you to walk me through your introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I used to go to a store local to me in Hobart, Indiana, and I would call it the card shop, right? So my parents would know to drop me off there if that's what I said. So this card shop that I played at, one of the first games I ever played was with a group that my friend Peter Petrucia was in, and in that group, there were 2 games running. One was a Savage Worlds campaign that was sci-fi, and then the other was a game called Harp, which is very similar to a game called Rollmaster.
Yep, it is a fork of it. Harp is essentially MERP. With a lot of it is based on MERP, but just with the IP stuff filed off. That is a vast simplification. Harp is an acronym for High Adventure Roleplay.
Yeah, exactly. It's also a very, very heavy table system, so it's pretty crunchy, as we would say. Now,
yes.
With that being said, I got to play in those games, and the first character I ever made was around the time that the Age of Ultron movie was coming out. So, not that long ago for some people, long ago for some people, But, I got to make like an android character. And that was a lot of fun. So I would say that was my first ever role-playing game, was Savage Worlds. And, the first game I ever ran after that was Call of Cthulhu. I got all of the Call of Cthulhu books, and me and my friends in high school would spend, a long time playing those games. We would spend nights just playing. We would... I think during one of our Christmas breaks, we spent like the whole week at my house playing the game. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and given the time frame, I'm guessing that was Call of Cthulhu 6th edition?
It was seventh, actually. I'm
Oh.
pretty sure it was seventh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I still have those books, and I think they're seventh edition. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I had just got them when seventh edition was still pretty new.
All right, that is fair. So with that with that in mind, uh, were you someone who kind of hopped around between different systems over the years, or were there certain ones that you largely stuck with for for a long amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, I've played a lot of different systems. I've obviously played, a lot of the basic role playing system. I've played 5e. I've played, um, gosh, there's so many systems, like it would be hard to name. But I like playing a lot of different games. Like Cobalt Ate My Baby, I play nearly every year. Um, Savage Worlds, of course, I still like. Um, I really like a game called Microscope, and that's
Mm-hmm.
you know to some of these games are like, we can call them systemless, right? Or like they are their own system.
Yep.
I really enjoy some workboard games. Forged in the Dark is obviously Choose, so that's great. This Monad Echo system from Broken Tales. So,
Mm-hmm.
as many games as I've played is about the number of systems I've played. I've ran D&D campaigns. Anything like for a long time I didn't run modules, but I had a deployment last year, and during that I ran a module. um, it was the Rime of the Frost Maiden.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoyed that. So lots of different systems, yeah.
Which certainly makes sense. Now,
Yeah.
with with that in mind, obviously roguelike is a I won't say it's a setting neutral, but a very plug and play approach. Uh, what prompted wanting to build a TTRPG based on roguelike video games?
Yeah, that's a great question. And some people are going to ask themselves what the difference between a roguelike and a roguelite are. And the answer for that is actually like incredibly complicated, and it's one of those things like some people will tell you I'm actually about. But all that to say, the point of the game is to do roguelike and roguelite stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but we call it a roguelike TTRPG because to be a roguelike is a little bit more specific. Um, but if you are a roguelike, you can do one of many things to just instantly become a roguelite. Now, with that all said, the reason I made the game is because I play a lot of roguelite video games. Things like Enter the Gungeon, Hades, Binding of Isaac, Faster Than Light, FTL,
Mm-hmm.
lots of different games, right? And
Uh,
those games are, for the most part, single player. Some of them are co-op, like Enter the Gungeon or Cult of the Lamb have co-op options. That's two players at least.
mm-hmm.
But for the large majority of these roguelite games, they're single player. And with that in mind, I really enjoy the kinds of stories they tell, the way in which I get to interact with the world, and I want to share that with my friends. So being able to create a game that allows me to, plug and play with a bunch of different items and play those kinds of games with my friends is the reason I started to make the roguelike TTRPG.
Mm-hmm. Which I can certainly get that. When you mentioned when you mentioned co-op roguelike, one of the first things that came to mind was synthetic. At least for me, because I am biased towards twin stick.
Yeah, what's interesting is there's just like thousands of roguelike video games.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, it would really be impossible to play them all.
Yeah, it's not going to stop people from trying.
Yeah, I know some really good YouTube channels and streamers who play a bunch of different roguelikes.
And I've certainly dipped into it myself. Uh, and especially given the times where it dips into genres you wouldn't think that it would. Oh, like there's been a few RTS roguelikes Or
Yeah, sure.
I know that there's one project that I can best describe as a fighting game version of a roguelike. Um,
Yeah, there's so many. Yeah, exactly.
and obviously, then there's the bigger entries. You know, your Hades, your Slay the Spire, that all that kind of jazz. Uh, but I'm guessing because of the fact that there's so many that dip into different genres and different play styles, that was the reason for this almost module like design that you have.
Yeah, the module-like design was kind of twofold, right? So, uh, first and foremost, like any scenario in the roguelike is going to be to its own part, like basically its own game, right? It's kind of the hope is kind of to be like Morkborg in that way, where Morkborg, you have a bunch of different games like Morkborg, like Cyborg, Pirate Borg,
Hmm.
you know, Bunny Borg, Blood Borg, whatever you want to call them, Borg, right?
Yep.
Duckborg even.
Yeah.
But all
Some of
those
them not
games,
even using the Borg name, but are that in effect, like say
yeah,
Ronin.
Farewell to Arms, exactly, yeah. So plenty of those are their own settings with that skeleton. But the point of the roguelike TTRPG is not only do we have a few modular style settings that are their own worlds with their own unique stories, and could be completely different genres of game than the first or the second.
Hmm.
But the point there is that in the actual book you have a dungeon workshop, and that dungeon workshop will allow you to create your own world or your own game with whether it's with your players or by yourself.
Hmm. And and to that end, one thing that am a bit curious about is you're using a is is it a case where where there is a unifying core when it comes to how the mechanics work that has context based on which module, or is it a case where each module has a different mechanical setup? Like, what's the
Yeah,
connective
that's a
tissue?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the connective tissue, for the most part, is the item based progression and the action pool die system. So, the first of which is everything you get is items. So, you'll have a set of starting items, and you get to pick those however you'd like. And there's a list of them, and those are going to determine things about your build or about your character that are going to make you unique, and a lot of them are going to be very different. Something like barbarian blood, where you want to take damage so that you can get enraged and deal more damage, is completely different than something where you have a summon item that gets stronger every time you fight a boss, right? So in that way, the core is this action pool system and this item based progression. Um, with that, uh, there's ways to, in every adventure, change the rules slightly or make something interesting happen. So, for
Hmm.
example, what we're working with Blazing Hearts right now, might be that the players only start with one heart, and through the gameplay and through dying over and over, they'll gain more hearts and become stronger as they try to fight to mend their broken heart. Whereas in Tomb of Time, every time you enter a room, you have to roll a die to see if the room's in the past or the present. Uh,
Hmm.
Things like that. Wild Hunt, if we reach that stretch goal, it's like a boss rush setup. So from the starting room, the boss room is always directly attached, and it's up to the players how many rooms they want to clear before going to the boss room. That way they can try to get more good gear or get more loot. So things like that are very plug and play. I was toying with the idea of having one without any combat. I was toying with the idea of having perks and, have the items be less physical objects.
Hmm.
But all of those things are, different things to add to the base system. And that action pool system, just so I do, don't do the injustice of not explaining that. You get 5 dice at the beginning of combat. Now, if it's a dungeon crawl style game, or a room based game, whatever it might be for a roguelike slash roguelite style system, you know, the fear is it's going to take too long, right? The combat's going to take forever, and that you're just going to be stuck in a grind. And to combat some of that and to streamline some things and make it actually feel, a little bit more run and gun like some roguelikes or roguelites feel, is the action pool system. So every time there's no initiative, enemies go first and players go second. Enemies always hit, so the enemies move and do their actions. Then it's the player's turn. The players get to respond to those actions, then attack and do simple actions in whatever order they'd like. Now, to dodge, do actions, and attack, they have one pool of dice. It starts at 5d6, and they get to spend those dice however they'd like between dodging, attacking, or actions. And each die is a 50-50 chance, right? So on a 4, 5, and 6, the die succeeds. Now, with that said, that's the core system. That and the items that the players get along the way.
And it sounds like there isn't exactly a universal resolution. It's one where the resolution is contextual. Is that accurate?
But by universal resolution, do you mean number of successes?
I mean, all roads lead to Rome in terms of how resolution is handled. Regardless of what type of role it is in, say, a D20 system game, the primary role is for seeing if a action is successful or not is still D20 modifiers compared to a DC. That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah, so then I would say that this is a D6 style game, right? So we have all D6s in that action pool, and there isn't some sort of DC or target number. What there is you just need a 4, 5, and 6. And if you get a 4, 5, and 6 with your dice that you roll, you get a success. So if you're doing something like a stat check or a skill check, you want to disarm a trap, break a trap, dodge a trap, whatever it might be, you're going to roll a number of dice. Let's say it's smarts to try to disarm a trap, and you have a smarts of 3. Well, you get to roll 3d6. If any one of those ends up a 4, 5, or 6, you get a success. There might be a few times in the dungeon where players add successes together, or need one more success to have a super special effect, but for the most part it's only one success required for anything.
Oh yeah, I can get that. So with that in mind, and I will admit I find the whole thing of framing each of these modules like Game Boy cartridges a amusing choice.
Yeah, we did our own special design of like a cartridge style. Obviously it is similar to the Game Boy cartridge. The Game Boy cartridge has some differences. Mainly like a notch in the upper corner that we don't have, but regardless of that, the fun retro feel of that, a lot of roguelite games use pixel art, right? Pixel art is cheaper, it's awesome, there's so many interesting stories you can tell, and with that, since so many of them use pixel art, it only felt right to represent the game in that way.
Oh yeah. So with that in mind, I would like to go through the list of modules that you have on the Kickstarter and kind of get a feel for what roguelikes might be a decent fit for what they're doing. I know you have the inspired by entry on the Kickstarter, but but consider this the best/worst Rorschach test you will ever take today.
Sure.
So the first one, and the one that's included with the quick start, Tomb of Time.
Yeah. So the question is, what roguelike/roguelite would I compare the Tomb of Time to?
Yes.
Great question. Any single one of them could easily be compared to Enter the Gungeon,
Hmm.
and for the Tomb of Time, it's very tempting to use Enter the Gungeon, but I actually think I want to say, um, wow, let me think about that. It's probably more like the first Hades.
I could see the first Hades. I could also see Phantom Abyss,
Yeah,
which is a game all about tomb running in these random um, tomb setups.
yeah, that would make total sense. I just haven't played that.
Uh, it is a interesting affair, kind of a mix of doing that and a bit of a race. Um,
Fun.
be, I've made at least one joke about the Shrine of the Silver Monkey, which
Okay.
uh, because when I saw the game, I kept thinking of Legends of the Hidden Temple.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah,
Uh,
you could think Tomb Raider, you could think Indiana Jones, you could think Uncharted. Those
mhm.
are all interesting video games. But it's really a spin on a lot of those of like, well, what do you get for an Egyptian mythology style Hades? Um, and the Tomb of Time for the most part delivers on that.
Oh yeah, and so the next one, Draconic Descent. I know on the Kickstarter page you said inspired by D&D, but um, I am kind of cheating, but I'd probably personally invoke the Misara duology of beat 'em ups that Capcom did.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I didn't know necessarily that those counted like roguelikes or roguelites.
They technically aren't, but but for the purposes of aesthetic and the like, I'm counting them here. I think there was at least one beat 'em up that leaned into roguelikes, but that is the vibe I end up getting. Uh, and
Yeah.
any any beat 'em up that has some form of endless mode would also count.
Yeah. And specifically for Draconic Descent, uh there's a lot of different fantasy style roguelite slash roguelikes. So almost any of those would work. Um I can't use Hades again. I think we're gonna have to pass on that one and come back to it.
Hmm. So the next one on the list is Blazing Hearts.
Yeah, Blazing Hearts. So Blazing Hearts is a lot of fun. It is in some ways going to be a mix between like a Souls like and a roguelite. So
Hmm.
Blazing Hearts, you could surely think about Slay the Spire when you think about Blazing Hearts. You are trying to ascend a spire in it. So that wouldn't be a terrible comparison.
I could I could see that. Um, could also see Trials of Valor, or actually a really apropos one would be Swarm. Would be Sworn.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to Binding of Isaac either
Hmm.
for Blazing Hearts because Blazing Hearts is going to be a little darker.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah,
Uh, and when it comes to Boss Monster, which you have as one of these stretch goals, obviously Boss Monster not to the board game of the same name.
yeah, and they're the same world too,
Hmm.
right? So yeah, completely related in some ways, which is really cool. The Brotherwise team is absolutely outstanding.
Hmm.
Um, so it's been a privilege to get to work on one of their IPs. Now, with that, Boss Monster is actually a little bit of a different setup. There are multiple, small dungeons, and it really represents like the actual play style you'd play in Boss Monster, but in the reverse, you play the heroes now. So
Hmm.
with that one,
Which
you know,
it is
for the
amusing that you set it up like that, since when I was doing one of my showcases after the Triple I Initiative show, one of the games in that was a reverse Castlevania called Revamp.
oh fun. Yeah, that's awesome. I
Hmm.
would probably use I you know, I'm gonna say For the King only because For the King has, dungeons and has areas you can travel around in.
Hmm.
So like, while there won't be an absolute ton of travel, there is an amount of, you know, getting to choose which, dungeon to explore, which way to go.
Oh yeah, I can certainly get that. And with Wild Hunt that being built around Monster Hunter, I haven't. If there has been a roguelike version of a hunter like game, I can't think of it at the moment.
Yeah,
Uh,
Cult of the Lamb would be a good example.
mhm.
Cult of the Lamb, you're building up your hub, you're farming, you're crafting, and then you have to fight these giant monsters in a forest.
Mhm.
So I would say Cult of the Lamb is similar to Wild Hunt if you can't just say, Monster Hunter, which is
Yeah.
technically like an extraction shooter kind of game.
Monster Hunter has gone in a lot of different directions and a lot of iterations over the years. Was there a specific Monster Hunter that you had in mind when it came to Wild Hunt?
Yeah, great question. Probably Monster Hunter World, I guess, but it's gonna play very differently. It's really almost like Shadow of the Colossus in some senses too, right? The inspiration is just giant kaiju style monsters.
Hmm.
I could have well have just said Magic the Gathering's Plane of Ikoria, anything where there's these giant monsters and you have to uh, craft, loot, and survive, right?
Yep. Uh, and I know the last stretch goal that you had as far as modules, Chrome City. I know you brought up on Cyberpunk Edge Runners. Um,
Yeah, it's
uh,
just a great example for a cyberpunk style world, right?
and the whole thing of blowing up Arasaka Tower has been attempted multiple times. Uh,
Right.
and I know that there was a similar thing going on with Fragged Cyberpunk from Wade Dyer,
Oh, fun.
but what instantly comes to mind stylistically uh, is not necessarily a roguelike, but there's some connective tissue, and that is the game Ruiner.
Okay, I haven't played Ruiner.
Uh, Ruiner is a cyberpunk twin stick shooter uh,
Okay.
with a silent protagonist who ex- because of the fact he's wearing a helmet, doesn't have expressions, but he expresses through displays on the helmet.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah. Yeah, what's fun is it's from Devolver Digital, which they also did Enter the Gungeon, and that's the
Hmm.
one that I'm going to use as the reference
They
here for
they
City.
published, which, although speaking of Devolver Digital, I do think there's going to be some interesting insanity when Dark Scrolls drops, because
Yeah,
that's their next project that they're publishing.
and that's a great point. Yeah, the developer is looks like Raycon Games. Yeah, great
Yeah,
point.
Raycon would later do Metal Eden, which is is in the realm of science fiction, but has more in common with um, Tsutomu Nihei's Blame, if than anything else, in terms of its particular style of science fiction.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's all the cartridges
Hmm.
in the setup, right?
Yeah, unless there's some hidden one on your end that I just haven't seen. But
Well, there's plenty of more that I want to develop, or I have a whole document of different game styles or different genres and game ideas.
mhm,
Um, but, at least to start with a few, because they aren't going to be super cheap, and, I've got to make sure people will actually want them, right?
yeah. Oh, yeah. We don't want a Flash Gordon RPG circa 1986 again.
Sure.
Uh, and with that in mind, it sounds like the approach you're taking is regardless of how you're kitted out. Uh, you you have to carefully manage how you're using your action economy because that set of dice is your action economy as well.
Yeah, you're right on the money there. So like the action economy is huge for balancing the game, balancing the enemies, balancing the encounters, and balancing the player's time.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, action economy is super important.
Hmm. And whenever there's that kind of limited resource, there's always the temptation to be conservative with it. Is but if is your approach to dealing with that particular issue what we call the 99 megalixirs paradox or the rainy day paradox? Is is that somewhat mitigated by the fact that you reset your action pool at the start of each turn?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to spend the dice, right? So, even if you don't have a bunch of stuff to do, that's just more dice for you to attack with. So, there will be times when a player doesn't get attacked at all. And, that's their opportunity to help another player or to just go out all out on attack. The nice part, like you said, is that it's refreshed. There are some items though that are rechargeable, and you run into the issue with those items where if you don't use them, well, it would have recharged by the time you actually do use it. So, you don't escape that issue ever. Like if you have health potions in any game, right? You're like, do I use the health potion or do I just try to go rest?
Yeah, there's always going to be that issue, but there I think we've all had that moment of holding on to one healing potion until the heat death of the universe, which is why it's called the 99 megalixirs paradox. It's based on a gag from a one-off comic of someone going, "What? I can't use one of my megalixirs. What if I need it for later?" He says at the final boss of the storyline.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Uh, and it's like that sort of caution is fine in moderation, but the key word there is moderation. And I suppose in that regard, it might be easier to look at the pool of dice that you have, almost like land cards in Magic.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, it's really just like how many actions you have in D&D, right? In a game like that, which is really heavy on action economy, you have one action, one bonus action, one reaction,
Hmm.
and if you spend all of those on your turn, you had a really large turn. You had an impactful turn. There's most of the turns where you don't really spend your reaction on anything, or you don't spend a bonus action sometimes. So, I would compare it a little bit like those actions. They're almost like action points, or,
If we're
a lot
going
of
with
words.
action points, then Pathfinder Second Edition might be a better parallel than D&D would be.
Yeah, true. Pathfinder has a really in-depth system for action.
Hmm. Now, because of the way it's set up, I'm operating under the assumption you're not using grid combat or anything like that. It's that sort of thing is abstracted.
Yeah, that's a great question. But, it wouldn't be a proper roguelike if it didn't have grid based combat. So, grid based is a complete optional rule that we have rules for.
Hmm.
Um, but yes, in general, we don't want players to have to count the squares. And while that sounds silly, it's like, well, just counting squares is really easy. Well, when every single player it gets to their turn, we've all played a board game where someone's taking a long time to decide where they want to move. It's much easier if we don't have a lot of that, and we have, as minimal, problems as we do have in the current system, which is nice.
Hmm. Now, in addition to that, one of the like I know you have items and the like as cards, but how easy or difficult would this game be to play on a virtual tabletop? Because we have had a growing amount of people have virtual tabletop as their primary way to play TTRPGs.
Yeah. I have the dream version of this game, virtual tabletop, in my head, but it should be very easy to play virtual tabletop. In fact, if you had, a chat open, like let's say Discord
Hmm.
on one hand, and, something like your virtual tabletop simulator of choice, you could have all of the images, hopefully, of the items and be able to throw them in to, the images of the item cards and throw them into the chat and be like, okay, hey, here's all the item cards that you guys are getting. And separately, you'd have your, you know, dungeon sprawl open. So the goal is that it's very easy and going to be extremely accessible for virtual tabletop.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm not expecting a dedicated setup for virtual tabletop because that involves doing a whole lot of coding, and I don't miss doing coding. But I know on the Kickstarter you say no classes. It's all about what you get. But on the other hand, there is sort of a I guess emergent archetype system in a lot of roguelikes where certain benefits or certain equipment ben- leans towards a specific playstyle. A big example that comes to mind is the divine boons in Hades. How each of the gods that you could get boons from have a certain theme that they lean into. Um,
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about building a build, right? So in something like Hades, depending on what weapon you have, you might want to do attack speed, or you might want to like, have chain lightning effects.
mhm,
But either way, you're kind of picking what's best for your build during that run. And the goal of the roguelike TTRPG is that you do get to choose what starting item you have, but throughout the run, there's going to be multiple different items that some might boost melee, some might, advance other different, summoning, something like that. So the goal really is that you're going to have some sort of emergent build during your run, but that you're not tied to that, every run. And the next run, it might be totally different. You might be going from the, sniper to, the giant hunk of steel that you call a sword.
mhm. And I'm guessing now with that in mind, since you're dealing with multiple genres, that means dealing with equipment lists that could go in a lot of different directions. So how do you ensure that equipment doesn't get too sprawling?
What do you mean by sprawling?
What I mean by sprawling is having whole equipment lists that might end up overlapping each other.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, um, I've been taking a lot of time to carefully curate the item lists.
Hmm.
And if you have a melee item that's just a sword and you get a better melee item that's just a sword, well, that's not a problem because one's better than the other. But yeah, it is very unlikely I'll have anything that's a direct duplicate.
Hmm.
There are some things that I might want players to have more access to, so I want to make it more likely that they're going to roll that. So
Hmm.
something like getting an extra heart. Well, if there's only one extra heart item in the game, then only one player can get it, especially if there's only one card. So having a few items that give something like an extra heart is going to be useful.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's kind of what I would lean towards. There is, you do want some repetition, but overall, the goal is to have every single item be unique, and each dungeon comes with its own set of unique items. So, if you had all of the modules, you'd have a really large pile of items that you get to choose from.
Hmm. And when it comes to determining the probability of getting certain items, I know that you do have a letter grade tier system, but how do you make sure that the rarity is reflected in how easy or difficult it is to get something?
Yeah, each floor also has a tier assigned to it that'll
Hmm.
determine how strong the enemies are, um, how strong the boss is. So, with that, you kind of correlate the two, or you relate the two. And if it's a C tier floor of a dungeon, well, you're gonna get C tier loot for the most part. Now, there's a table, and if you roll really well, you'll get better loot. But for the most part, that's where it ends up.
Yeah. Also, as far as Draconic Descent, I just realized that there is a roguelite that in the works that is a perfect fit for it. Uh, are you familiar with I don't think it's out yet, but the game Tears of Metal?
No, not at all.
The best way I can describe it is a roguelike Scottish Dynasty Warriors.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it could be
Uh,
that. It could be, Darkest Dungeon, at some point comes to mind. Like,
mhm.
there's a, yeah, anything that's going to give you the classic fantasy feel.
Yeah, I feel like its name escapes me, but I could have swore I saw one that was leaning into Golden Axe with the concept. Uh,
I don't
which
know
if
it.
if that's the case, I'd be on. If that's the case, and they don't have those damn gnomes, I would be on that instantly. Um, and while it
Fun.
isn't a roguelike technically, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the Gauntlet series. Um,
Oh, sure.
but of course, you mentioned Darkest Dungeon. Darkest Dungeon is a protracted game of chicken.
Yeah, every roguelike is going to have its niche and its thing you could say that it is.
Yeah, I think one of the more unique entries we've seen recently is Ball X Pit, or just
Haven't
Ball
seen it.
Pit. A base building, brick breaking roguelike.
Fun. Yeah, there was also Mega Bonk, which got really popular.
Hmm.
Mega Bonk is super fun. Some of those, they're just so unique. And the point there is that, like, since there are so many of these interesting or fun environments that people come up with, and that's what I'm trying to channel with the Roguelike
Hmm.
TTRPG, is, people's creativity to create a world in a way that they're a little bit more familiar with and allows them to express themselves.
Yeah. Uh, there was also Force Strike, which came out. I think that was last year, which has some elements of it, but it is also mixing that with being a 2D beat 'em up, where you can practice the fight before you start it.
Oh,
Uh,
fun.
and kind of having a pseudo class approach in the form of the mentors that you can go with, each of them having a different fighting style that they favor. And
Yeah, sure.
it's well, it's always going to be nice for those who like wuxia adjacent games, like me. Uh, but within a lot of roguelites, there's the loop of you keep going until you croak, and you end up resetting, but you get some sort of resources that you can use to gradually build up your floor. In a sense, do you have
Yeah.
something like
Well,
that with the roguelike TTRPG?
yeah. I mean, interesting to point out that some games aren't like that.
Hmm.
Um, some games you don't get a new resource or you don't have anything that helps you along the way. What comes to mind, and some people could, I guess, debate the point, but faster than light (FTL).
Hmm.
There are things you unlock permanently, like new ships or other things, but generally speaking, you start at the same point every step of the way. I do think there are some upgrades or some different hull variations you can get, but for the most part, yeah, the what's cool is there's two things in the roguelike TTRPG.
Mm-hmm.
There's experience of understanding what the enemies are like and what they do, what the boss's attacks are, and how lethal they are. But there's also gold coins, and gold coins are the currency of choice that you get for experiencing the dungeon. You get them from defeating enemies, rooms, going through different style of rooms, and you get to keep those gold coins and bring them back to the hub and buy new gear. And some of it'll be key items, some of it'll be temporary buffs. But yeah, that right there is your currency that's going to help you progress and make sure that you don't, just stagnate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, with that in mind, since nobody plays Uno as written and people are going to homebrew, I'm not asking for a whole homebrew book or something like that, but do you have plans to put in a section to give advice if somebody wants to tweak what's there to do their own thing, or even do crossovers with some of the modules?
Yeah, you'll see on the Kickstarter at I think 12.5 we had the dungeon workshop that's going to get a full art treatment. And the dungeon workshop is an entire section for creating items, dungeons, enemies, floors, different unique parts of the dungeon. So the real special part about that is the dungeon workshop is that. The dungeon workshop is I can go from the start of that to the end of that in the book, and I'll have created an entire roguelike TTRPG module.
Mm-hmm. Which I can certainly see that. Now, with that in mind, was it always going to be D6 as the primary die resolution, or were there other resolution setups that were considered at some point?
Yeah, there were other resolution setups that were considered. The first thing I considered was Savage Worlds system.
Mm-hmm.
But I just found that system didn't work. So, after play testing a few different things, I found this was the absolute best for emulating the kind of experience I wanted my players to have.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And with that in mind, is it going to be a case where there's going to be one book for roguelike and each of the modules is going to be their own smaller book, or are they all going to be collected in one big book?
Say that one more time.
That one more time. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Fair enough.
Is it going to be a case where the individual modules are going to be combined into the core rules to make one book, or are the modules going to be their own books?
Yeah, okay. So there's going to be two in the main book, right? The quick start, will be separate, but the hope is to have Draconic Descent and Blazing Hearts in the main book, and each other one will be separate.
Mm-hmm. Which that certainly makes sense. And with that in mind, what are you shooting for as far as a release window? Not a date per se, but a ballpark of a sort.
Q1, Q2 for sure of 2027.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. I'm guessing the digital version would be at the end of the year.
It's hard to say. The goal would be that. Yeah, the goal would be to have that digital version around the end of the year, maybe January. But yeah, we already have the quick start, and that's a lot, right? So the next parts will be coming very shortly after. And, we could see a digital version, slightly sooner than that, but I would expect it to be around, the very beginning of 2027.
Hmm. That would make sense. Oh, and it'd probably be a relatively easy way to get people over the over celebrating National Hangover Day,
Sure.
also known as New Year's Day. But
Right.
with all that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens here. And
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
yep, anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Yeah. Well, cheers to that.
And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.